We tend to think that crises only happen far away, in places like Venezuela, Syria, or developing countries. But no, right here in the United States, in lands that once prided themselves on being the land of plenty, people are now fighting over every package of noodles, every gallon of milk. Not because they're lazy, but because they have money and there's nothing left to buy. This isn't just about rising prices anymore. This is about life being suffocated day by day by the gradual disappearance of things that once seemed trivial. A bag of flour, a roll of toilet paper, a cold medicine. And what's even worse, the massive distribution system of the US, once the pride of the world, is showing just how fragile it really is. When the first link breaks, the entire chain pulls millions of people into hardship. And if you're living in one of the states I'm about to mention, this isn't a warning. It's a direct message to your dinner table tonight. Number 1, Hawaii. Do you know what's truly terrifying about living in paradise? It's waking up to the endless blue of the ocean, but not being able to find a loaf of bread in the supermarket. Hawaii is no longer just a tourist paradise. It's becoming a live experiment of America as the supply chain unravels. Not in the future, right now. Imagine living on an island thousands of miles from the mainland, knowing that 85% of everything you use every day, from food medicine to toilet paper, has to wait for the ship to arrive. No alternative roads, no large reserves. And when a ship is delayed or a container gets stuck, every family here immediately feels the consequences. This isn't a hypothetical, it's happening. The price of milk at $8 a gallon is just the tip of the iceberg. What worries people here isn't paying a few extra dollars for a meal, but the times when even with money they still can't buy what they need. Empty shelves in supermarkets are no longer an occasionally thing, they've become a regular occurrence. And when Safeway or Walmart have to limit purchases, you know it's no longer a logistics issue, but a sign of a system falling apart. Workers in Hawaii, from hotel staff delivery drivers to farmers, are having to painfully change their eating habits, skipping meals, eating frozen food instead of fresh vegetables, buying expired goods to save a few bucks. Even restaurants which rely on tourism are having to cut items from their menus because they can't get the ingredients. Even in schools, the menus are being trimmed, and kids growing up in paradise are now eating some of the least nutritious meals in America. The issue here isn't just about money or goods, it's about uncertainty. It's the feeling that you're living in a US state, yet being treated like an isolated land somewhere in the ocean. Hawaii can't grow all its own food, and when the federal government prioritizes domestic protection without considering the geographical uniqueness, the people here are left with only one choice. To wait and hope. The question is, if a place like Hawaii, with its glamorous image and billions of dollars in tourism revenue, is struggling like this, what happens if the crisis spreads? Could this be the first warning for all of America that a state can become a commodity desert even without natural disasters, without war, but simply because no one was prepared? Number 2, Alaska. There's one thing few are willing to admit: if a true supply crisis sweeps across the US, Alaska might be the first state cut off from the rest of the country. Not because of war, not because of natural disasters, but simply because there will be no way to get goods to it anymore. Imagine living in a place where fresh vegetables have to be flown thousands of miles just to reach supermarket shelves. Meat, milk, rice, cooking oil, all completely dependent on airplanes and cargo ships. Every delayed flight, every container held up is another day the people here can't get basic food, and Alaska has no plan B. Recently, in some small towns up north, the price of a bag of salad shot up to over $11 eggs milk. Even bottled water are being rationed. If there's any left to buy. Some areas can only be accessed by small planes, and when bad weather hits or fuel prices become unbearable, the planes stop coming, and the people left behind have to fend for themselves. No options. No backup. What's starting to deeply unsettle people here is that all support has its limits. Food banks can't supply like they used to. Shipping costs are so high that many relief organizations are giving up. Some native communities now only have fish wild game. But even ammunition is scarce and gas is too expensive to travel far. Some joke if we lose power, we won't panic as much as when we lose supplies. But this is no longer a joke. Because when the modern logistics system starts to crack Alaska, with its geographically isolated position, is the place that reflects the potential future for the entire country. If today it's an $11 salad, tomorrow there may be no salad at all. And in the upcoming bitter winter, cold people won't just be shivering from the temperatures, but from not knowing what they'll eat tomorrow or how they'll survive. The question is no longer, will this happen? It's how much time do we have before it spreads nationwide? If a state twice the size of Texas can't even ensure basic food supplies for its residents, then the entire national distribution system is in serious trouble. And the American people, especially the working class, can't keep being left waiting like this forever. Number 3. California. California has long been considered the food basket of America. Open any package of raisins, bag of almonds, or box of strawberries in the supermarket, and chances are they come from the Central Valley of the state. But what most consumers don't see, and perhaps no one warns them about, is that California is facing serious problems in its role of feeding America. Think about it, to maintain millions of acres of crops stretching from Fresno to Bakersfield, California, farmers don't just need land and water. They also need imported fertilizers, replacement parts for tractors, automated irrigation systems, and most importantly, immigrant labor. However, this year everything has changed drastically with skyrocketing tariffs, goods from Asia and South America being blocked or priced out of reach, and a severe labor shortage due to tightened immigration policies. What's the result? Thousands of acres of crops are left unharvested. Produce is left to rot in the fields because harvesting and selling it would incur even greater losses than letting it spoil. In supermarkets in Los Angeles or San Jose, you start to see empty shelves in the fresh produce section or signs limiting purchases, like 1 bag of carrots per person. Onion, strawberry, and carrot prices have increased by 50%, yet the shelves remain empty. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The situation becomes even more alarming when the supply chain is strained at the very gateways of the country. The ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, two of the most critical shipping arteries in the U.S., are clogged due to a lack of containers, insufficient labor, and skyrocketing unloading costs. As a result, retailers like Walmart, Costco, and Trader Joe's have started slowing down their shipments. The outcome: people can't get essential food items or have to pay double or triple for a bottle of cooking oil or a bag of rice. The issue is, this is no longer a temporary story. When fertilizer prices don't go down, when workers don't return to the fields, when the ongoing drought continues to exacerbate the water shortage, and wildfires keep burning down farms, what will feed California's nearly 40 million residents? Not to mention the rest of America, which depends on the state's agricultural products. California may be wealthy, but money can't be eaten. When food isn't on the shelves, when people have to scramble for every bunch of vegetables, the question is, will a state, once a symbol of prosperity, be ready to face a new kind of hunger? A hunger caused by reliance on a supply chain that is decaying every day. Number 4. New York. What made New York strong was its ability to import everything from all around the world. But now that dependence has become its Achilles heel. French cheese, Italian pasta, Japanese rice, Mexican butter, even the spices essential for tacos, all of these are becoming harder to find. Why? Because the global supply chain is in turmoil. New tariffs have doubled the price of imports. Containers are stuck in ports, shipping costs have soared, and wait times are longer than ever. An order that used to arrive in 10 days now gets stuck for 6 weeks. And people are starting to feel it. Eggs, once a staple breakfast food, have gone up by 40%. Fresh milk is no longer the obvious choice in every household. Imported vegetables, once a specialty for the middle class, like Korean cabbage or Japanese mushrooms, are nearly gone from the fresh produce aisles. But the most heartbreaking part is that small shops, the bodegas on street corners that fed millions of working class residents, are quietly shutting down because they have nothing left to sell. New York has always been expensive, and with food prices climbing every day, low-income people are left with 2 options: skip meals or eat cheap, low-quality food. Did you know? In this city, 4 million people still live below the poverty line. They're not hunting for truffles or looking for Korean ginseng. They need rice eggs, and now even those have become burdens. New York is great at consumption, but not at production. Once the supply chain has issues, this city can't grow vegetables on skyscraper rooftops to save itself. It relies entirely on external supply lines, and when those lines break, New York reveals its true form, a massive yet dangerously weak consumption machine. The question is no longer, will we still have sushi at night? But rather, when the shelves are truly empty, who will survive in a city that can't feed itself? And if the crisis continues, people won't be lining up for the new iPhone. They'll be fighting for the last gallon of milk, the final bag of rice, the last slice of cheese. Number 5. Florida. in the eyes of tourists, remains a sunny paradise with blue seas, white sands, and luxurious resorts. But if you're a resident living here, especially in 2025, you'll see a very different reality. Empty supermarkets, out-of-control prices, and essentials like rice milk and fish. Once daily staples, now become items that many families hesitate to buy. This isn't due to hurricanes or natural disasters. It's because the supply chain, the lifeblood of the entire state, is getting stuck at every turn. Florida isn't a large-scale food producer. While there are expansive orange and lemon groves, most of the food, from meat, rice pasta, spices, canned goods, to even bottled water, has to be imported from elsewhere, and with tariffs on the rise, shortages in containers, and shipping costs increasing every day, the supply system Florida relies on is almost falling apart. Key ports like Jacksonville and Miami are overwhelmed with a lack of labor, and goods are stuck in transit. Many shipping lines no longer choose Florida as a destination due to the high costs of docking and transporting goods inland. Residents of bustling cities like Orlando and Fort Lauderdale report having to drive for over an hour just to find a store that still has basic supplies. In rural areas or senior communities, which make up a significant portion of Florida's population, access to food has become a serious issue. People living off pensions now have to choose between buying enough food for the week or paying for their monthly medications. The problem is compounded by the fact that the tourism industry, the heart of Florida's economy, is bouncing back at a rapid pace. Millions of tourists pour in each month, and of course they shop and consume. This has caused many restaurants and hotels in Miami, Key West, and Tampa to offer higher prices to secure the remaining food on the market. And in this race, local residents, especially low-income workers, are often the losers. The reality is large supermarkets like Walmart and Publix in Florida have started to limit the amount of items such as milk flour and cooking oil that each household can buy. In more remote areas, people are gradually turning to processed foods because there's no other option. But what's the trade-off? It's a decline in nutritional quality, a threat to the health of residents, and a life that's becoming increasingly tight and difficult by the week. Florida has money, it has tourists, it has year-round sunshine, but none of that matters if you can't afford to buy a carton of milk or a bag of rice when you need it. And the scariest part, many people still don't realize that this paradise could very well be one of the first places to feel the hunger if the national distribution system really collapses. Number 6, Texas. No one expected that in a state with thousands of farms and hundreds of food processing plants, there would be a shortage. But the issue lies in the fact that while Texas produces a lot, it doesn't produce everything it needs. The things people rely on daily, like rice, pasta, frozen meat, seafood, processed foods, and even toilet paper, are mostly imported from elsewhere. And when the national supply chain begins to collapse due to rising fuel prices, escalating import taxes, labor shortages, and a lack of containers, Texas is no exception to this downward spiral. In areas like El Paso, Laredo, or the southern border region, many supermarkets have had signs saying out of stock for several days in a row. Even major chains like H-E-B and Kroger can't restock the shelves as quickly as they used to. People in industrial areas like Dallas or Houston have to get in line early, squeezing in with others just to buy a few basic items for dinner. In rural areas and immigrant communities, the situation is even worse. Some places are so isolated that the nearest store is miles away, and when they get there, there's nothing left to choose from. Some people have to buy from private vendors at twice the price with no bargaining. No options. Just pay or go hungry. Texas is vast, but that vastness is becoming a burden. When delivery trucks don't make it on time, an entire area can be cut off from supplies. Most of the main warehouses are concentrated around major cities, leaving remote areas. From the western border to sparsely populated communities in the center of the state. To fend for themselves in times of scarcity, a shipment being delayed a few hours in Austin might seem trivial, but in a poor town near the border, it means a week without eggs, milk, or fresh food. The tension has only increased as Texas's population surges due to migration from expensive states like California and New York. Hundreds of thousands of people are flocking in, hoping to find a cheaper, more stable life, but unknowingly putting even more pressure on infrastructure and an already overwhelmed supply chain. Texas was once the promised land, but now it's slowly becoming a place where every can of beans, every loaf of bread is a battle to get. The question is if even Texas, once the backbone supplying goods to half of the US, is struggling with the supply chain crisis, how many other states will be able to hold up, and those who once believed Texas would be the last to fall. Perhaps they need to rethink. Because if resilience is worn down by scarcity every day, what will be left is nothing more than a brutal struggle between need and desperation. Number 7. Nevada. Since the beginning of 2025, households in the suburbs of Las Vegas, Reno and Carson City have begun to notice that the familiar pace of consumer life is no longer as easy as it once was. Items that used to be readily available on the shelves like milk eggs, rice fruit, canned goods, and toilet paper are no longer just choices. They've become a hunt. People now have to line up early scanning empty aisles with the faint hope that today's shipment won't be delayed any further. The root cause lies in Nevada's economic structure. It's a state with little domestic manufacturing. The land is mostly desert, and the dry climate makes agriculture difficult. The processing industry is too small to meet the needs of a rapidly growing population following the post-pandemic migration wave. Most consumer goods, from fresh food to daily necessities, must be imported from California, Arizona, or the West Coast ports of the US. But in 2025, with rising fuel prices and escalating shipping taxes every month, the supply lines to Nevada are thinning, breaking and in some cases completely cut off in more remote areas. The situation gets even worse when Las Vegas, the heart of the state's tourism and gambling industry, continues to draw millions of visitors each month. The demand from hotels, resorts, and major restaurants doesn't decrease, but instead grows dramatically, creating direct competition with local residents for food and basic supplies. Restaurant chains with money and power prioritize bulk purchases, causing supermarkets and local markets to face severe shortages. Some stores in Henderson Sparks and Mesquite have had to stop stocking frozen foods because the storage costs outweigh the profit. Residents in the southern desert regions fare even worse. They have to drive for hours just to find a store that still sells milk or fresh vegetables. Something that was once part of daily life not too long ago. In Nevada, the food crisis doesn't hit like a storm, but instead creeps in, slowly infiltrating daily life. It forces workers, who were already living on the edge, to make painful choices, eat less to cut back on healthcare spending, or spend extra time traveling just to buy a few small items. Shopping carts that used to be full are now reduced to just a few scattered items, and the worried look on parents' faces as they walk through supermarkets with their children speaks volumes. They're trying to appear calm even as an undercurrent of panic broods beneath. Number 8. Illinois. In Illinois, the supply chain crisis is no longer a distant issue or something happening in far-flung isolated areas. Right in the heart of the state, in Chicago, once considered the largest logistics and transportation hub in the Midwest, supermarkets are starting to show long gaps on their shelves. Items that people once thought were always available, like fresh milk, flour, deli meats, toilet paper, or vegetables from other states, are now the items people have to fight to get. And in the suburban areas and agricultural towns in southern Illinois, the situation is even more alarming. Shortages aren't just temporary, but prolonged and lingering, leaving residents feeling helpless as prices continue to climb week by week. The problem lies in the fact that while Illinois produces a lot, it's deeply dependent on the federal transportation network. Many factories and large warehouses around the Chicago area are essentially just transit points, not where the final products are made. Rice from the South, fruit from California, frozen meat from Iowa or Nebraska, and especially canned goods from coastal ports. All have to travel through rail truck or river container systems. But in 2025, this chain is being choked by fuel shortages, skyrocketing shipping costs, and a severe shortage of truck drivers as many logistics companies have been forced to cut staff to cope with operational costs. What's worrying residents even more is that the rail system, once the pride of the state, connecting major industrial regions from the east to the west, has now become a bottleneck. Internal reports show that many freight transport routes are delayed by 3 or 5 days, or even canceled entirely if there aren't enough goods to ship cost-effectively. This has forced many local supermarkets in Peoria, Rockford, Springfield, and Champaign to scale back their inventories, prioritizing fast-selling, high-turnover products. while gradually removing the items that were once staples in daily meals. During the long cold winter months, many working-class families, particularly in low-income areas around Chicago or older industrial neighborhoods, are having to choose between keeping their homes warm or spending money to stock up on food. High gas prices coupled with rising food costs have stretched household budgets to breaking point. People have started sharing information about stores still in stock as if it were secret intel. Some local markets have even had to limit purchases of items like pasta, canned fish, or eggs, making shopping in Illinois now reminiscent of the early days of the pandemic. But this time it's not temporary panic, but an ongoing concern with no end in sight. Number 9. Louisiana. Under the dim lights of Creole restaurants along the Mississippi River, the spicy aroma of gumbo still lingers in the air, and the sound of jazz music echoes from afar. But behind the back doors of grocery stores in Baton Rouge or Lafayette lies a reality that few expect: empty shelves, fresh food shortages, and soaring prices that force many Louisiana residents to choose between buying meat for dinner or putting gas in their cars to go to work the next day. Louisiana, a state rich in culinary tradition and once a major seafood hub for the U.S., is quietly witnessing a collapse of its food supply chain. Unusual floods, extreme weather, and transportation breakdowns from last year's hurricanes have made shipping slow and costly. Meanwhile, imports, from Thai rice, Italian pasta, to Middle Eastern spices, are being hit by new tariffs, and logistics costs have doubled items that were once staple ingredients in Louisiana. Family meals now have to be carefully stored behind counters or are sold in limited quantities. In the poorer neighborhoods of New Orleans, the number of people relying on food stamps has skyrocketed, but they can't find goods to buy. Even with support money in hand, local markets are reporting shortages of eggs, milk flour, and canned goods, things that were once considered lifesavers during Hurricane Katrina. Even more frightening is the return of the black market, where basic items are sold at inflated prices to the poor who don't have the means to travel far. Fishermen along the Gulf of Mexico are desperate as the seafood they catch has no domestic market due to a frozen distribution system. Shrimp, crab, and fish, once Louisiana's pride, have become rare delicacies even at the place where they were born. Working-class people in Houma Lake Charles and Monroe are starting to practice sharing in their neighborhoods. Much like during wartime, each household contributes something, then distributes it to the whole block because the supermarkets only have wilted vegetables, frozen fish, and a few bags of rice with limited sales. If Louisiana has stood strong after terrifying natural hurricanes this time, it faces another storm. Silent but more persistent, the storm of rising prices of goods disappearing daily and of a growing sense of unease creeping through every neighborhood. The people here aren't just worried about tomorrow, they're beginning to fear that there might be no dinner to look forward to. Number 10. Arizona, under the scorching sun of the Sonoran Desert. Arizona is now facing not only the drought of the land, but also a thirst for goods, from food to medicine. In Phoenix, Tucson, and small border towns, many stores have begun imposing purchase limits on essential items like bottled water, rice-powdered milk, and cold medicine. What shocks residents the most is not the prices, but the complete absence of these goods from the shelves. In a state with vast stretches of arid land, most necessities depend on long-distance transportation from other states or across the Mexico border. But when the federal logistics system began to break down due to soaring fuel prices and new import tariffs, Arizona found itself isolated almost immediately. Shipments from California or Texas, its main lifelines, are now delayed by weeks or even canceled altogether. Goods from Mexico are stuck at the border due to stringent inspection regulations and a severe shortage of drivers to transport goods across the border. The atmosphere in Phoenix's suburban markets these days is filled with panic. Residents recount fighting over bags of noodles, bottles of water as if living in a war zone. Some small stores have tripled the price of eggs and milk, if they have any in stock. Parents in immigrant communities in Yuma or Nogales are sharing boxes of milk for their children. And in Flagstaff, which typically enjoys a milder climate, people have started stockpiling as though a disaster is imminent. But this time, the disaster isn't coming from the sky. It's coming from policy and an out-of-control market. Worse still, Arizona has a large population of elderly people and chronic patients, those who rely on medications and special foods. When pharmacies report shortages, residents begin to panic. Some doctors have had to advise patients to reduce their doses, to make it through while waiting for the next shipment, with no certainty of when that will be. An elderly woman in Mesa collapsed in a supermarket after going without her diabetes medication for 3 days. This story quickly spread and instilled a deep fear throughout the neighborhood. Arizona was once an ideal retirement destination due to its low cost of living and year-round sunshine, but now the state once called the desert paradise is turning into a nightmare come true. Where residents are not afraid of the heat, but of hunger and disease. And if the situation continues to worsen, Arizona may not only be thirsty for water, but also for hope. The reality of goods shortages is no longer a distant problem or something that only happens in poor areas. It's creeping into every supermarket, every shopping cart, and every meal for millions of Americans. From cities to rural areas, from wealthy states to regions once considered invulnerable in terms of logistics, and what we've just covered is only the tip of the iceberg. Of course, this isn't a statement that all of America is about to face starvation, but it serves as a wake-up call that if we don't pay close attention, if we think everything is fine because the lights are still on in supermarkets in big cities, one day the shock will hit when we no longer have any options left on the shelves. So the question is, what have you prepared for if where you live suddenly faces a severe shortage of goods? Do you think the government and retail corporations truly care about workers like you? Leave a comment below. Where do you live and what's the food situation like in your area? If you think this video is worth considering, please subscribe to the channel and share it with your loved ones, because who knows? They might also be facing a crisis no one dares to name yet.